What's good, everybody? Scoobert Dubert here. Welcome back to Love Music More. I'm super excited for this conversation I just had with Bryson Barnes. Bryson Barnes is a musician, jazz player, and has the best job in podcasting. He is the head of audio production for NBC News, working with Dateline, MSNBC Today, and NBC News to develop new content and execute workflows across an industry-leading portfolio of audio storytelling. And believe me, it is industry-leading. I learned so much from him, and it is so cool to talk about that intersection between audio and music and storytelling. And it works. You know, there's a thing about musicians doing the audio stuff. It works. He's got 15 Apple #1 podcasts to date. So it was a great conversation with one of the best in the entire industry, who I really look up to. And I hope you enjoy that too. And also check out the music that he's still currently making that's really, really awesome. And we talk about that journey, you know, like that journey of who are you making the music for? What are the goals that you're trying to accomplish? And how can you develop your career over time? And I love that conversation. Before we get into the conversation, though, I wanted to invite you to check out DistroKid. That is our title sponsor. DistroKid makes music distribution fun and easy with unlimited uploads, and artists get to keep 100% of their royalties and earnings. And we have a 30% off code for you if you go to distrokid.com/VIP/lovemusicmore. You'll be able to sign up, get a 30% off discount, support the pod, support your career, and release as much music as you want and keep all the royalties. 1 million plus artists rely on DistroKid because of that to get their music onto Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, TikTok, Tidal, Instagram, and all the other major streaming services. I love it because I'm able to send splits to all the different people that I work with. I was just doing a remix, then I'm doing a collaboration. I don't have to handle the accounting. DistroKid does it for me. So check it out at distrokid.com/VIP/lovemusicmore and enjoy this conversation with Bryson. Welcome back to Love Music More. I am Scoobert Dubert, and I am joined with Bryson Barnes, who has the best job in podcasting. What's up, Bryson? Thank you for joining the pod.
What up, Scoob? Good to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk about your role as head of audio production for NBC News. You're working with all of these incredible like household names, and also elevating them and pushing them into different kind of maybe some areas that it's like, hey, I want to have an idea for a podcast, or I want to do a special that is made for audio. And I'm so excited to think about how you take these household names and then help them into this medium, and then also just kind of what you've seen in podcasting over your career, as well as your music career. And I think that that's so cool. Like, you're a musician, you're recording music, and then you're also recording podcasts. I think there's a lot more overlap than people realize.
There's definitely a lot of ground to cover there. Yeah, I started as a musician, as a jazz trumpet player. Cool. Realized after a while that, you know, for me, that wasn't really a viable path. And so I sort of transitioned into audio production. Yeah. And found myself making podcasts for a bunch of different shops. And right now, yeah, that's right. I'm at NBC News, and we do all kinds of stuff, you know, true crime and lifestyle and deeply investigative limited series. And we cover politics and, you know, the whole gamut. And it is really gratifying to be able to work on such like a wide range of projects. And like you said, the music really informs the way that I think about making podcasts. Just foundationally, you know, how sound interacts with other sound in space, sort of in a linear timeline. There's so much you can do. It's such a distinct format. You know, we can talk about why podcasts are so effective. And I think at heart, it's just, we've created a forum where people can just listen to other people talk and tell stories, and it's very fundamental to who we are as sort of human beings. But on the other hand, you can get so deep and multifaceted with the sound world that you create. And for me, music plays a big role in that.
I love that. And it's so cool to hear how podcasting has evolved too over time. Like, I remember the early days of where it was like on my iPod or whatever. Right. And it was very much just kind of like lower fidelity, lower production, and now the soundscapes, the intro and outro music is incredible.
Yeah.
Like there's all of these different things that I think that has elevated the art form and then kind of interacted with it to become what it is today, this juggernaut, this primary kind of tool for people to discover news. I feel like that's it. Podcasting, listening to podcasts has been one of the biggest ways that I stay in touch with the world. And I like it a lot because it's more unfiltered. I hear the person that wrote the article, I'll read the article, but then they'll be asked questions, they'll speak in a natural tone. And I don't know, I feel like I'll really be able to get the nuance from the expert opinion beyond just a written word.
Well, I think it feels more human if somebody's just talking to you, especially if someone's talking to you in your ear in sort of high fidelity, just the psychoacoustic effect of how your brain is processing that information, I think is a lot deeper. And, we'll have to fact check the studies that back this up, but then, more passively ingested content. And that's reflected in how quickly podcasts are growing and how much money advertisers are spending trying to reach audiences in podcasting. Obviously, the conventional wisdom that podcasting can be really segmented and really targeted is another big strength of podcasts. So, yeah, I think
those are really good points.
That's correct.
Yeah, and I totally agree with the segmentation because we're naturally self-selecting, I listen to these podcasts that are kind of like nerdy, like China Watch kind of podcasts. I love international relations and Asia, which is like not really something I talk about much on this podcast, but it's fun. It's fun to hear the different types of advertisers. Like when I'm listening to my Lakers podcast, they talk to me. When I listen to my beer making podcast, they talk to me in this way. It's kind of fun.
Right. You can get kind of the utility out of it that you want, or you can really unwind and listen to a great story. Yes. But as we do in my work, and I have in my career, leverage that power of storytelling in long form to tell stories that need to be told.
Yes.
in a way that they wouldn't resonate otherwise.
Yes,
totally.
In a way that might be deep in the newspaper or a link after a link after a link. Instead, you can really zoom in.
Yeah, but bringing it to life, really letting the voices speak for themselves, finding the best way to do that.
I'm curious about your take on that psychoacoustic effect. Yeah, it can be very personal. I listen to a lot of podcasts when I'm doing my long runs, so it feels like somebody's running along next to me telling me an incredible story. How do you, in your personal life and also in your professional life, kind of think of that psychoacoustic, maybe even parasocial kind of aspect of podcasting?
When we were chatting before we got going, it made me think about the tools that go into the music that we love, or the sounds that we love, or the podcasts that we love. And I think there's so much. It's like a black box for a lot of people. They listen to something, it has an effect on them, and I think there's so much going on there that's affecting your perception. It's how deeply are you listening versus just how are you sort of letting the effect wash over you. And I'm really fascinated by, well, what is it about this particular sound entering at this particular time? Why am I fading it in before we hear the sound on tape? Why, sort of like this perceptual sort of palate cleanser for something that's to come, but you're not even hearing that it's happening. Or it might be something as simple as your dad played the guitar and it's having this really deep emotional reaction. So there's just such a, and then what do you know about the subject matter going in? I mean, there's just so many elements to consider, whether it's like just a simple song, whether it's a two-way chat podcast, or whether it's like a deeply reported story that's leveraging, journalism over the past 22 years that is like, getting people out of prison. So, just the way we react to different stories and really the whole range of things that sensitize us to how we consume them, I think is fascinating.
And I love that idea too of the tools, and then also the like sense memory. Yeah, that's one of the things. So I love beer, which is an embarrassing thing to be talking about on Friday morning. What's good, guys? Scuba Dubert here for the Love Music More podcast, and I want to let you in on a little secret. One of my favorite new things, Minuendo lossless earplugs. So these are really, really, really cool. I've got two of them here. It comes in this awesome sweet box, but it comes with a bunch of little goodies like carrying case, tether, cleaning tools. But the real tech is in these little tiny lossless earplugs. My favorite thing about it is one, you can swap out any of the included tips. So depending on the size of your ear canal, we're all built different. You can get a nice, comfortable fit. But there's also this little lever on these adjustable versions that can go from 7 to 25 decibels of cutting. So depending on if you're listening to nu metal or jazz, you can just hit the little lever and adjust in real time. And I think that's really, really cool. You know, for the longest time, I was listening in those awful foam earplugs, and it makes the music sound like that. It just cuts off all of those high frequencies. And so I was always tempted to sneak them out a little bit. Oh, it's my favorite song. No earplugs. And then you get hearing damage. You have tinnitus after the show, and then you come back, you want to work in the studio, and guess what? Your ears aren't right. And that's why I love Minuendo, because you can just pop these in and have full fidelity with these lossless earplugs. There are two different versions. One is adjustable with the little lever, and then this one is fixed at 17 decibels. So check out Minuendo, MINUENDO.com, or you can search them on Amazon and find Minuendo earplugs today. One of the reasons why I love it, and one of the reasons I love listening to podcasts by brewers, is they talk a lot about sense memory in a way that I don't think we talk about enough in audio. They talk about it in terms of smell, like aroma, flavor, and how they try to elicit these things like, oh, that like is reminiscent of like gummy bears, and that puts me in this happy place. And you know, these like little things that they're playing with the psychology of taste, like a great chef would, but they're doing it in a beverage. And in audio, we can do so much of that too. Especially for people like me. I'm an auditory learner. I was always the person that in class, they didn't necessarily think I was listening because I was like looking off or drawing or something like that. It's like, you're
taking it in.
Taking it in the way that I do, you know? And I think it's really powerful to be able to give that ear candy, so to speak.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Because you think you're isolating certain factors that are having an effect, and sometimes you can, but there's always different ways things are interpreted, and it's really fun as a creative person to sort of find ways to channel that. And every situation's different, you know. Some things require more sort of open thinking and are conducive to more creativity and sort of novelty and approach, and some things you just have to sort of, you know, go to work and put the theme in and paste it out and let the voices speak for themselves, you know. How do you not distract? Like, how do you kind of like thread that line if, say you're doing a limited series, something that has a little bit more of like a, you know, fingerprint on it. How do you thread that line in between giving excitement and adding to the pace of the show without distracting from the narrative? That's one of my favorite parts of the job, is sort of when I have a big project coming up, where it's sort of like a long form concept. I like to meet with the people who I'm going to make this story with and say, how do we want the sound world to complement the story we're trying to tell? Like, how do we, and a big way is, well, how much archival sound are we using? You know, how many different voices are we going to have 30 interviews spread out, interspersed? Is it going to be sort of, and sort of consider how you're going to balance these sounds and these textures against one another. And then of course you think about the music package, and as often as possible, I, really advocate, and we do original music packages for just about all of our originals, and coming up with a package that fits hand in glove with the editorial and sort of narrative vision of the show. And it feels kind of like alchemy, but at the end of the day, you can take your cues from a lot of different elements of the storytelling process. And I think that's super fun. We did a podcast called Letters from Sing Sing at NBC, and it was a Pulitzer finalist. I'm really proud of this show. It was a fantastic story. And I highly recommend you guys check it out, maybe drop a link. But anyway, when we were talking about what we were going to do for the music concept, we had so much archival sound going back years of journalist Dan Slepian investigating J.J. Velasquez, who's the subject of this story. Sound from inside the prison. I thought, why don't we take that sound and use that as a fundamental basis for synthesizing a lot of the actual musical elements in the score? Yes. So you have birds chirping, you have chains, you have doors slamming, you have hubbub and walla, and all of these sounds that originated from within the confines of where we're telling this story. Really putting the listener in the shoes of people who have been wrongly convicted of crimes. Yes, right. And so we worked with, a really great music house, Four Elements Music, to take those sounds, resynthesize those sounds, and come up with the score that, of course, there were other elements of the score. We had other references that we're trying to sort of match in terms of tone, in terms of orchestration and instrumentation, and those are other considerations too. But just taking our cues foundationally from like the elements of the story that we really want to convey. So that's an example of how I approach what you're saying, And
I love the term that you used, sound world. That's just a captivating, like,
well,
evocative
that's
term,
what we're creating, whether we like it or not, So it's good to sort of think through every possibility.
Yeah, I mean, in the same way that I've talked on previous podcasts about how important I feel intros and outros are. Not necessarily as like it has to be an 8-bar intro, like not like that. But in terms of giving the song like a good birth and a good death, because it's like it is a linear art form. It only exists for this period of time that you're playing a song, giving it like a moment to like introduce itself and then a moment to get off stage. In whatever way that is appropriate for the song. It can be chaotic, it can be beautiful, whatever. But just like giving that enough interest and time and intentionality, so that you're not just like faded in, faded out, whatever. It's like, no, this is an important moment for the song.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's I mean, if I'm scoring a podcast or trying to score anything really. There's a lot of craft to it. I mean, there's only, there's obvious places to come in and punctuate, and there's sometimes you want to play against the action, and there's sometimes, like I said, you want to sort of preface something subconsciously so that by the time the moment comes, the swell doesn't come out of nowhere. Yeah. You're right. There's a lot of ways to think about the ins and the outs, and sometimes there's, I've heard people that I respect a lot say categorically, why, no fade outs. Cool. Be cool. Be intentional about your sting. And well, what if that's not what's supporting the action? What if that's not what's supporting this transition that we're trying to create here?
Yeah.
There's no hard set rules, but I think you're right. I think sometimes letting the VO just speak for itself, and letting the words sink in with nothing at all is the right creative call. And sometimes, but then again, there's always alternative ways of approaching things, and
absolutely,
and sort of maybe that's the fun. Also,
that is the fun.
That can be just as effective.
Totally, yeah. It's freeing to not have only one right outcome or one right output.
Right. Yeah.
There can just be some that might feel a little more right given what came before or after. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's funny because I play with that too. It's like I feel very strongly about my creative choices, and if I'm in a position to sort of do what I want, which is most but I'm still sort of thinking ahead to possible objections that I'm going to get, because in a collaborative environment, so it's a fun interplay between I always think that I'm right when I score something or when I bring music in a certain way, and then someone else has a different opinion, and I'm like, well, okay. My first reaction is you're wrong, but it's like, no, how can we come together and plead your case, and that's part of the fun. It is,
and that's part and parcel with all things audio, probably all things creative. Yeah,
yeah.
I also like the perspective on it because I think it puts it into a context that people fundamentally understand more, which is visuals. Where if you think about like fade in, fade out, dissolve cuts, like how are you wiping from one scene to the next? How are you like setting these things up? And then applying those kind of ideas to audio, that in a lot of times I think audio just kind of flows by people.
Yeah.
Or it's perceived, it's certainly emotionally impactful, but it's a little less like easy to grasp and easy to be like, I saw that thing go from that thing to that thing, versus I heard the chains of the prison naturally transition into the birds outside. That. That's a little bit harder, I think, to place.
Well, I think you're right. I think people need to learn how to consume certain formats. I think we have tropes in linear TV and now even, scripted, where we kind of understand the little winks and nods and visual cues. It's become a really deep lexicon that a lot of people speak. I think audio requires a new set of tools, and I think there are certain things that are maybe more out of reach because, we only have, 30% of whatever age eligible people in the country, again, we'll fact check the stat, but listen to podcasts at least once a week. And so, unlike television or other digital content where people kind of understand how to consume it, I think that's really exciting, because we can be more creative and we can be more evocative, and we can leave Easter eggs in there for the people who've really learned how to listen closely, and we can just let other people say, I mean, I've heard it all, how do you make it do that 3D thing? It's like, and it's like, that they felt that, they understood that on a certain level. So I think that range of experience with podcast and audio first content is part of why it's an exciting frontier in storytelling, at least for me.
I agree. And I agree that, when in the absence of a hard and fast like lexicon or vocabulary, you could probably see the same thing with jazz, right? Like there's different arc of jazz that has different types of creativity, different types of bounds.
Oh, definitely. I mean, jazz is, you've got your standards and you've got your licks and you've got all of this language that's really rich and complex, but so sort of well-worn.
Yes.
And we have the same thing in like TV, and a lot of times you'll cut, you'll go from the studio to the correspondent and you'll hear a whoosh, and maybe we'll adopt the whoosh in a podcast, and to sort of accomplish the same thing. So, it is fun to have this tool set and then find new ways to sort of play with them.
Certainly, and like video games has got its own
definitely
thing,
right? Like
with that,
right. Which is it's always fun to try to sort of break the mold and play against expectations too. It's it's a careful balance.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think about that. We did some 3D music videos using a video game software called Unity. And there was like just this natural conversation with Mario 64, because it was just like, hey, that's kind of the backbone of this medium.
Yeah.
It's like everything we do is, are we leaning into or pushing away from Mario 64?
Right. Well, it's like, if you're making a podcast, it's everyone's talking. It's either Serial or The Daily,
Right. Yeah.
And it's like,
Totally. Or so, Dan Carlin. Hardcore History.
Yeah, exactly. That's another popular one. Yeah.
That one's funny because he does these like big like timpani hits, because it's it's so dramatic, but it like literally hammers in his point is with
Yeah, I mean sometimes you got to hit people over the head with a stick, and that's
he does,
and then everyone gets it.
It's true, and it's great. I don't know. It's fun listening to content that is, especially stuff that like maybe you learned in school or something like that, and then have it editorialized in a way that's like, hey, you haven't looked at it from this perspective though. There's just drama inherent.
Well, right, and there's also something about just somebody telling you about it.
Yeah, you're right. True.
The way in which you're receiving the information, sort of the auditory pathway is, it's so much more complex and nuanced than, say, the visual pathway in terms of how these signals are getting, sent to different parts of your brain and the way that you're responding on an instinctual level,
I like
to auditory information. So maybe you're right. Maybe that makes us more conducive to sort of listening more closely, but then also like the social element of what it sounds like, just to have somebody be like, hey, have you thought about it this way? It's
right.
It's also a tone thing.
Totally. And the charisma of the microphones, just like you did, you leaned in a little bit and got a little
Exactly.
It's like, ooh, got sexy. But that's what I think is so fun with all the tools that we have, is that you can highlight those things. The microphones have a certain charisma. The hosts have a certain charisma. There's a lexicon that's being developed. The producers are understanding different ways to interact with that. And then really, like if you think about it, we're plugging into the oral history tradition, which is older than anything. Like we're talking bards and stuff. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and that's fundamental to who we are and how we learn and how we process information. And I think I'm just thinking of this now. I mean, this podcast that we're having right now. I mean, the two-way remote podcast aesthetic has really become, speaking of lexicon, like sort of front and center in the lexicon. And people can kind of, imagine 10 years ago if you went to a YouTube video and you saw a two-shot of two people with microphones in their faces and headphones on having a conversation, you'd be kind of like, okay, but now
Yeah.
you see that, you're like, all right, this is a podcast. I wonder what they're talking about. Let's, but I wonder if the pandemic and all this virtual, teleconferencing and not being in person, sort of helped to foster that in a way. It's kind of interesting.
Certainly. But then the microphones are part of what ends up legitimizing it, where it's like,
Right.
I've done this, but I didn't do it with that, and I didn't do it with sound panels and lighting. It's like,
Right.
oh, okay.
Exactly.
These people are legit.
I know. Yeah, talking again, very specific language and lexicon, and and credibility is such an important part in this whole conversation. I mean, where does it come from?
I know. Right. I mean, that's something I candidly, I struggle with, and I am working on, because I do every other podcast is a solo podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll do guest, and then I'll do some sort of topic. And that's been
cool.
a really difficult and challenging, but also very, very fun kind of way to like evolve the podcast and see how do I share something that I'm working on in my music production world that hopefully will legitimize when I return the next week for a conversation.
I like that. That's cool. I mean, again, it's just all these little markers of legitimacy, but ultimately you just got to do your thing and believe in yourself.
Exactly.
And get up every day and don't stop doing it.
But that's the dirty little secret, is like, it doesn't really matter what you're doing, and music is kind of the ultimate of this.
Right.
You're not going to get good in a day.
Right.
You're also not going to get good by just like hanging out with good people. That's part of it. You're not going to get good just by going to school. You're going to get good at it in the aggregate over years.
Right.
Like, it's like learning a language. You can't do all the flashcards in a day and be better tomorrow. You're going to be like not even marginally better. You're going to be imperceptibly better tomorrow. Right. But compounding, you're going to end up getting great.
Well, and you got to do it, Ultimately, you got to put yourself in the room and clear out the distractions and do it, And it's like, you hear people hating on other people's music, and you say, well, go sit in a room and make a record,
Right, exactly.
This guy's out there doing it.
Yeah, join the conversation.
Right, exactly.
I've got some big news, everybody. My vinyl record is out. We didn't make a ton of these, so these guys are going to sell out, and I would love for you to get your hands on one of them because they're so dope. They're so dope. And it comes with a whole bunch of like liner notes and pictures and special stuff, the things that really went into making this record. And I want you to get your hands on it. So go to scoobertdubert.pizza or check out my Instagram for a link, or click the link in the show notes or the bio or wherever you're watching this to pick up your copy. They're going to sell out. We really did not make very many of these, and I want you to have it. It's like a collector's item. So thank you for supporting my music, and I can't wait for you to hear it actually on physical vinyl. Enjoy the rest of the episode. I think even if like the conversation that you're putting out is not making better music, you're at least making the music that more aligns with your vision, and that's really what a lot of people are saying in those value statements of like, this is good or bad, is a lot of it is like, I don't think music should sound like that. Right. That's really a call to arms.
Right. I mean, so going to music school and studying jazz and composition and later audio engineering, there's so many these rote structures that were meant to sort of internalize, but really, and so you're sort of always at odds with, well, how does my creativity fit within this? Am I doing something that sounds too much like, 60s era Train? Am I doing something that sounds too much like, Nefertiti, Miles already did this? Or, well, how am I trying to build on this?
Good examples, by the way, because that's a lot of people.
Well, sure, but then you look at like Dave Holland, and then you look at Jason Moran, and you look at the way jazz and Robert Glasper has sort of like evolved over the years, and you're like, well, where do I fit in this? Am I a jazz musician? But really, it's like all along, just trust your gut and tune that stuff out. Like I write songs as a hobby, and I'll write something, and I'll be like, well, I don't know if that's pop enough. That's like, but I can feel something in my in my creative voice that's just like, no, do this, dude. This is what you want to do. This little vocal flourish because it feels good. And I've been learning to lean into that because honestly, what am I doing this for? It's like, oh, I'm trying to calibrate the perfect song and get a sync and have a breakout hit. And it's like, this is all ego. Get out of your head, man. You're like, you've set time aside to make music. And what I find is that when I lean into those sort of creative voices and tune those other things out that are trying to self-contextualize a product that I'm making. When I lean into the creative experience, it's always better. The product is always better. Maybe that's because I did what I wanted and I like it more. But maybe that's the point, you know. And you hear a lot of artists talk like this, you know. They're like, just do you.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, that's so trite. Easy for you to say. It's like, no, that's the sauce.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that there are other ways to say that might like land with people. The way that you were prefacing it is exactly one way. Like, because distilling it down to just do you is like, I don't know who I am.
Right.
You know, it's like but the
That's
opposite,
true.
the part of it, the corollary is you're going to discover it as you go. Like, just keep saying yes to yourself. Follow yourself down the cracks.
Right.
Yeah.
And the process is so important. You know, it's you could, you know, I could program something. I could sit there and listen to it. I could play with the piano roll for an hour. It's like, no, man, you missed the point. You know, it will reveal itself.
Yes.
Just keep going.
Exactly. And understand that there are different hats to wear at different parts of the process, especially as you're laying stuff down.
That's a good point. I
always like to, I don't follow the path of least resistance. I follow the path of most excitement.
I like that. Yeah.
Because like sometimes the excitement leads you down to like, shit, that's going to take 6 hours. But I'm going to, you know.
Right.
I'm going to do it now because it's exciting.
And I like that you're bringing it back around to sort of craft and having a production plan. Because it's one thing to like start a demo and have 70 of them, you know, in your demo folder, and it's like a verse and a chorus, and you move on to the next one. Right. Get your butt in the chair and being like, all right, I'm writing a second verse. I'm writing a bridge. I'm going to get this done. I'm going to get this done by 8 o'clock. I'm going to totally. And then what am I going to do? I'm going to mix it, you know, and then I'm going to have a release plan or whatever that is. You know, it's always seeing a few steps ahead. And I think that, I mean, to bring it all the way back around, that's one of the things that I love about making podcasts, is because personally I get to do sort of music, I get to do audio engineering, I get to weigh in on editorial, and I get to think about like the whole portfolio. And it's one thing I like or will and want to be able to bring more to my music when I actually have time to do it, which is like a holistic sort of, all right, pre-production, these are the demos, it's going to be an EP, I'm going to go and I'm going to record it in Burlington the 3rd week of August, I'm going to try to release it, you know, whatever the plan is, you know, and then stick to it. Because you're right, it isn't all just sitting there wistfully creative, you know.
No, it's going in with the intention of, I'm going to finish it. I'm going to finish it by this day. I've got room to rewrite. And it's like giving yourself an allowance of both structure and freedom, I think ends up going towards the best possible result. Because like you're saying, like sit your butt in this chair and write a verse. Right. If tomorrow you listen to it and you're like, that is the worst verse I've ever heard, guess what? No one else ever has to hear it. Exactly. It's gone. Right. But you did it. You like actually wrote a verse. You know, like you took the step to where this is now a demo that you're going to refine. But if you just never wrote the verse, even if it is the worst thing you've ever made, that is better than doing nothing. Yeah.
Small achievable goals.
Yeah, totally. And like check it off, and then you can add it back to the to-do list. Like that's okay. But it is the progression of production creates its own positive momentum.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's tough to stay motivated sometimes.
Absolutely. That the whole world is pushing against motivation, and so much of life is just trying to get caught in positive feedback loops. Everything from exercise, diet, you know, like I was just talking about beer at 8 a.m. Like, you know, this is probably not the most positive feedback loop, but whatever. You know, there's all of these things that, if you pour stuff into it, things will get better and it'll get easier, but you got to do it every day.
Right.
And you're not always going to stay, you know, focused. You're not always going to be creative. But it's just like setting that intentionality, setting those frameworks, pouring energy into it, and then it will generate its own energy if you put enough energy into it. The muses do respond.
Yeah, and also valuing yourself enough to do sort of what you know you need to do.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah, because when it's easy, it's easy.
Yeah, totally. And you're always kind of chasing that high. And I like to think a lot of the easiness comes from doing right by the muses. Like,
I like that. Yeah.
That is what you're being called to do when you hear an unconventional idea, but you do it and then you feel passionate about it. Now you have more momentum. It's like
Right.
you did the right thing, and now you're being rewarded for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, making bold choices it feels risky sometimes, but you got to get that idea out there.
But by doing it, it's self-inspiring.
Yeah.
And
No, it's true.
when you cut that off, then you mess with the, not to get hippy-dippy, but it's like the chakra kind of thing. I like it.
Right.
There's a usefulness in some of the more mystical ways of looking at audio production, because I think that it helps, even if it's not real, even if it's whatever, it just helps it put it into a box of like, I need to let this thing flow. If I don't let this thing flow, things get bottled up. It's like you need some acupuncture to free it up.
Right.
Even if it's not, actual acupuncture.
I think you're right, and I think it's not hippy-dippy at all to consider that.
Yeah.
If you are in a creative state, if you are feeling fulfilled, if you are sort of creating music and art in the moment from an uncluttered perspective, you will take deeper breaths, you will oxygenate your blood, you will relax, unclench your jaw, you will start to align your lymphatic system and your chakras, which is, relies on an ancient, system of physiology and psychology, which is, there's nothing hippy-dippy about it. So,
right.
I think they're definitely, and you're, so if you get that creative state right, if you get that balance right, if you get that positive feedback loop right, definitely has a psychological and physiological, feedback too. I think it's very useful.
And in all things, the end goal should be flow state.
Yeah.
All these metaphors and stuff are just trying to get towards that. And when you find flow state, that is the there's a Greek word, I don't remember it right now, but like basically the idea of like being possessed by the muses, where you are are now just like a vessel for this thing, and it's going to come out. And it's funny because sometimes it's not even the best thing, but it like just hitting that point,
right?
You got months of inspiration.
Yeah,
you're just going to keep chasing it.
I love the way, and then the Greek theory of how the different modes would evoke different emotional states, and you don't want to play Phrygian for your kids or whatever they're going to fight.
Right, yeah. Totally.
No, it's a cool way of thinking about it.
Yeah, and I don't know, I think it's fun to think about the mystical because it is thinking about the things that you cannot control. Yeah. And in audio, there are plenty of things that we can control. And I think we can lure ourselves into thinking like, I am the god of this mix or whatever.
Right.
And then a lot of times the coolest thing in the mix, you're like, I don't know why that stuff routed into that compressor is doing this now, but I'm not going to touch it.
Right.
It's like the ghost in the machine sometimes is the better mix engineer. Sometimes the best melody is the one that like you dreamt of, or, these weird little things, or like it's 3 a.m. and you're kind of noodling on a guitar and like you come up with the little line and you're like, oh, that's the hook.
Yeah.
Those dashes of the illogical are valuable, and probably even more valuable than the stuff that, like you're saying, the frameworks and the traditions that you're trying to quote and you're trying to be inside of.
Right.
That's all helpful, and that gives you like a foundation. But the best stuff comes out of who knows where.
Well, and it's interesting. It's like context is everything, and I'm always baffled. Like I'll like be synthesizing some synth patch, and I'll be like, I hate this, and then I'll be, then I'll listen to something in a pop song, and it's like, that sounds a lot like what I made, but I really love this. It's like,
right.
I was listening to this song, and I've been listening to it a lot, and I all of a sudden realized that there's like this electric guitar sample that's pretty prominent in the mix that just sounds awful, and I'm like,
cool.
Super works though. Like if I was going through samples, I'd be like, nope. So it's fun to be surprised.
It is, and that's one of the reasons why it's great to audition things in context as much as possible. Right. And why I have the ship has totally sailed. I am now like kind of mixing as I go, which so many people told me never to do. But the reason why I do it, even though it creates sometimes more work on the other end, is I know what I'm fitting into.
Right. I like to mix as I go when I'm doing original music because I know how much headroom I have.
Yes, exactly.
I know how much space I have And I'm auditioning like the raw elements against the finished product, like especially the voice.
Especially the voice. I agree.
So if I'll do, I don't know about you, but like tons of takes. And I'll be like, no, this sucks. And it's not so much because I want a better take. It's because I think you're refining as you go.
Absolutely.
And you're making it better. And then you have that. But how can you know if it really works unless, you have your signal chain, how you want it, if you have your gain where you want it, maybe one day if somebody's paying me $1 million to go into a studio and do whatever I want, fine, take it, mix it, I don't care,
Yeah.
But when you're a one-man band and you're self-producing, I'm right there with you.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt this very important broadcast, but it's time for one more advertisement for myself for this podcast. What I'm asking for is for you to rate it 5 stars, share it with your friends. This is like the most important thing for this podcast to grow. So if you want to do this, you go onto the podcast screen, right? You click on the ... on Spotify. Under there, it says rate show, and you go and you click it. 5 stars. If you could do that for me, that's the best way for the algorithms and all this stuff to share it out with the world. I know that it's a lot to ask, but if you could please just hit those 3 dots and then a 5 star, it would really help us out and helps us, get the word out and spread the love of music. So thank you. If you're listening on YouTube, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you so much. And here's the rest of the episode. I remember, I don't know how old I was, but I was watching some documentary about Bruce Springsteen writing lyrics in the studio. Yeah. And I thought like, oh my gosh, that's so ridiculous. Like it costs so much to be in the studio. And now I'm doing it all the time, but I love it. I get why he was doing it. Cause there's a certain energy of like, you're in the studio, you just lay down that track and now you need lyrics.
Well, it's funny because I've heard a story about him and he'll write 100 songs for a record and then, only pick 10 or 12 of them. It's like, but then you get in the studio and the spirit moves and you're like, no, maybe it's like you said, you're in that flow state. It's a constant, it's a work in progress,
Yeah. And
make something else.
When you're doing it alone too, like this is one of the things that I think is tough when I work with collaborators and it's a good and a bad thing, right? We usually lock in the lyrics. We get to a point where we've negotiated, we feel good about it, go execute it. But sometimes when you're in the vocal vibe, you're like, actually, no, I don't like this lyric, or actually, no, I should sing it this way, or should substitute that word. Having the freedom to do that sometimes can result in like you're saying, like, let's write that verse, let's write that bridge. You get it done, and then now it's vocal recording time. Like, I don't like it anymore.
Right? No, that's okay. It's iterative.
Yeah, iterative. Yeah. Iterative's a great word for this. I'm curious in terms of, because I know pre-production quite well for music production. I do some for this podcast, but I'm curious on the like larger scale when you're working with corporate collaborators, stars, deep, rich libraries, and maybe like you're saying hundreds of interviews. How do you go about just like starting the process? How do you start sorting it? How do you start sketching it out?
Well, like you said, it depends on the show.
Yeah, for sure.
It depends on the format. It depends on, like if you have a podcast with 2 remote guests, like you and I are chatting here, that's a pretty typical format. I mean, getting good tape coming in is key, deciding if this format, because this format is like, are we doing a video pod or are we not doing a video pod? How do you want the audio files? Do you want me to send you my mix pre-backup after we're done, or is this going to be fine? Getting good tape coming in because the highest possible quality is great,
Yes.
And that goes for if you have guests who are remote, are you in a position where you can send them a mic and headphones if they don't have one? Are you in a position where you can hire someone to go and stick a mic in their face and record them, and always sort of fighting for resources to get the best tape from every possible source that you can.
Yeah.
And that might mean a reporter in the field needs like a shotgun mic and a portable mixer, or just sort of getting ahead of any potential problems. File management, you might have, so for like a really a ton of reporting and a ton of archival, a project might have 500 or 600 pieces of tape.
Wow.
Making sure those are filed and tagged and you know where to get them. Just having all of it's like mise en place. Everything is like laid out, as you sort of develop your story outline and your editorial vision. And of course, the music package we're talking about and these other ideas about how we're going to put this piece together, making sure that all the tape you have is being gathered in a systematic way and cataloged and transcribed in a systematic way. So that when you go to put the pieces together, you're working with the best ingredients that you can. And then, that's pre-production. And sometimes if you have archival tape that sounds like crap, there's different tools you can use to help clean it up or make it more intelligible while still maintaining that, sort of lustrous beauty that is old, low fidelity, archival recording. You don't want to make it too anemic. Just making sure you have good tape. And then you know where to find it.
You know where to find it. Yeah, it's like cooking. Get the good ingredients and chop them up and get them all sous chefed.
Make sure the person who's recording it knows what they're doing.
Yeah, right.
I mean, just basic stuff.
But yeah, it's hard to swim upstream against that.
Yeah. And then, of course, I mean, I say all that, but that's just from like a technical. I mean, the music and the sound design concept is a little bit more creative, a little bit more editorial. But there are shows that are great in Riveting and Gripping that that are just full of bad tape and bad mixes and mediocre music. But you can have such a compelling story that relies on just brave journalism, and that also deserves to be recognized. So my job and my ethos is to make sure things sound great.
Yes.
But I know that that's not always possible given every scenario or every person's respective resources. Doesn't mean they can't make something riveting, and contribute.
Yeah. I agree. And same thing with music, right? Like it's great. You want to have the highest fidelity. You want to have pro quality gear. But there's a lot of music out there that is not recorded super well, but it's compelling enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And I listen to it all the time.
Yeah. And there's a charm to it too. Like you're saying, the preserving some of the low fidelity. I think about that all the time. It's like, how do I sometimes make it not seem like everything is recorded digital in 2024?
Right. You gotta step on it.
Yeah.
It's good. The answer is decapitator.
Yes, the answer is decapitator. Have you heard of sketch cassette? That is a good answer too.
No, I'm gonna check it out.
Look that one
remember
up.
that.
That's a good lo-fi. It's like a cassette tape emulator, and it does a good job of making stuff sound bad in a good way.
Sketch cassette. Yeah. I think the last one I used is probably Isotope Vinyl.
Yeah, nice. That's a good one.
Sketch cassette. I can check that out.
Yeah. I highly recommend it.
All right.
Yeah, no, it's rad. In terms of the like Foley and field recording, I'm always super fascinated by this because I'm trying to do more of that in my music. I just got like a little Zoom recorder, and then I bought a $180 binaural microphone.
Sick. That's great.
So that it's kind of sticks in my ears in a weird way.
Oh, that's fun. That's cool.
It's really fun. So I did a song called Golden State of Mind that I released somewhat recently. That's going to close my next record that's coming out very soon. And I have a bunch of little Foley that I recorded when I was camping with my friends and just like rain on a tent and just these like nice little California things.
I love that.
And it really puts me in a great headspace. But I'm just starting with my kind of Foley adventure. I love it. But I'm curious, what do the pros do? What are some of the things maybe I could look out for? Maybe gear that you think is cool in Foley, or how's it done? Is it boom mic? Is it Zoom recorders? Like what are we seeing out there?
I mean, it depends. I mean, I think what you're doing is really exciting. I mean, like, man, I was listening to. My friend was like, "Hey, check out my friend's record. She recorded all the drum mics on all the drums on her cell phone."
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
So, like, really, I guess it cuts back to what we were just saying. Like, from a technical perspective, it doesn't really matter if you can achieve the creative effect that you're going for. And what I've realized a lot of the time is like, you don't have to overthink it. I mean, but then again, like, let me see, like. I don't know if you can see my little Mix Pre 3 here, man. Like this thing is, the sound devices products are pretty industry standard for going out in the field. Zoom stuff is fine too. Cool. It works great.
No, but, that's good.
This thing is indestructible.
Sweet.
Usually with the new stuff, we don't fake anything. It's we're giving you what we reported, and so somebody's in the field recording field sound. And they'll go on a reporting trip specifically to record field sound. I remember this show, American Radical, that we did, and Preeti Varathan, the producer, I sent her into the field very well equipped with like 2 shotguns and a mix pre, and she went around, following an interview as it's taking place,
Cool.
getting that sound. You know what I mean?
Are you doing like XY or something with these shotguns? Like, how are you capturing the stereo
I
field?
think that particular. Well, I think she had a zoom and she was using the stereo pair on the little zoom itself, and then holding an MKE 600 Sennheiser, which is also pretty standard.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know. I mean, we throw all the stuff in the mix and decide like what sounds good. The stereo image off that little zoom, I think, worked really nicely as a bed, and then can't remember how much of the shotgun we mixed in.
Cool.
But yeah, like for the new stuff, we gotta, we gotta capture it in the field. And like I said, you set your gain right, get as close to the source as you can. And then, there's like denoise or debird or D whatever, like you can modify things so that there's certain elements that are really distracting. You can clean it up, but you're using the sound to help tell the story, which sounds like what you're doing on your record,
Thanks.
So
Yeah,
if your sound is helping tell the story, if the ear is picking it up and it's not distracting and it's having, the appropriate sort of emotional impact, I think that's successful.
Yeah. I'm always just curious about the, tool strategies. I also think that podcasting is so interesting with stereo field because so much of podcasting is straight down the middle, like basically mono.
There's some big shops that still just release everything in mono.
Cool.
No, I mean, I'm a big believer in a wider stereo field than a podcast. And if you've listened to any of my podcasts, I mean, I like panning a two-way a little bit left and right, like we're sitting there. Or if there's a round table, if there's like 5 people, panning them, so that it sounds like you're in the room.
Right, creating some separation.
I mean, you can get messed up sometimes if people are literally in a room and the micing's, with phasing.
Phasing.
But there's ways you can ameliorate that. I mean, obviously, if 2 people or more people are in a really noisy environment and you're on a tight turnaround and everything just sounds like a hash, an easy way to make it sound better is put it in mono. So I do commiserate.
Yeah. No, and it's cool too. Like if you have a mono voice of God type narrator, and then the stereo bed kind of comes in. That's such a chill raising kind of. Yeah, moment.
Definitely. I mean, you always try to spread the music, or if there's sound effects or ambie, a little bit wider. Situate the voice closer to the middle. I mean, a lot of people are really excited about spatial audio in podcasts and in music. And I think that could be an interesting frontier too, just to your point.
I agree. I think it'd be more interesting though, like you're saying, with a lot of voices. Because we did one. There's this guy, Martin Riegler, who does spatial audio, and we did like a 360 and spatial audio version, which is kind of cool. You can the listeners can check that out if they haven't heard that one. But yeah, when there's only 2 voices, it's cool. It's cool, but I don't think it quite has the effect that if you were maybe capturing ambisonic Foley or having a large panel or having some sort of purpose to why is someone behind me? Like some like
Agreed.
the narrative reason to do that rather than just like the technology exists.
I think you're totally right. Yeah.
It's sometimes hard to find. Like it's like technology in search of a problem. Like where's my killer app kind of idea?
That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you don't know basically what you're listening on, how it's going to fold down, and what's the point? I tend to agree for most kinds of content. Yeah. It's not
still
really
fun
solving a problem. Yeah,
fun to engage with, and it's fun to have in the head just in case you hit a moment. You're like, there it is. I need to use this.
Well, because you can get pretty arresting effects with binaural audio alone.
I agree. I mean, and it's even just contrast creates so much. The effect of it's 3D and it's it's just stereo, but it's like the contrast between the other thing was big.
Right. There's a lot you can do.
Yeah. So I want to ask you one last question. This is the question I always ask my guests. Okay. So the show is called Love Music More. This segment is called Love Music Why. And it's just a moment to reflect on why do you love music? Why do you love audio? What makes you passionate about staying in this and waking up the next morning and doing it again? It's a hard question. I know. It's open-ended. You can take that wherever you want to go.
Yeah. I mean, I can go from the top down and say that I love telling stories and I love, I love using a skill set that I have to do something that I feel like is meaningful and adding to the world. But from the bottom up, it just feels good, you know.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
It feels good to sort of vibrate, and it's just a way that I can just like be me in the moment. And like you said, when you hit that flow state, whether I'm even with, you know, if I'm scoring a podcast or if I'm working on a deeply personal project that might never see the light of day outside these four walls of my bedroom studio, and there's just something about it that feels right and clears all the other smoke away. And that sort of intuitive sense of alignment with this moment is just a really good feeling to have.
Love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Bryson.
Where thanks for having me.
Get in touch. Where can they follow up with you?
Let's see. It sounds like Bry on Instagram.
Cool.
So I'll give you that. Sounds like Bry, BRY.
Cool. And I'll link that in the bio too. Awesome.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you so much,
All right,
Bryson.
great chatting with you.
Great chatting.
See ya.
Take care. See you.